Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Got Mental Health Podcast. I am your co-host, Rachel Cove. I am a multi-passionate entrepreneur, author, artist, mother, and certified recovery coach.
I'm your co-host, Arthur Mogilevsky, entrepreneur, girl dad, animal activist, and owner of AM Healthcare, a premier substance abuse and mental health treatment program.
With the collective experience of 21 years working in the mental health field, we are excited to bring to you a safe and fun place to talk all things mental health.
We will be interviewing experts, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and professionals in the entertainment industry to better educate, inform, and inspire our community to have positive mental wealth.
Welcome back to the Got Mental Health Show. My name is Rachel Cove. I am your co-host along with my other co-host, Arthur
Mogilevsky, Rachel, one of these days.
Not very important. In the studio, we have Eric Feig. Eric Feig is a veteran entertainment lawyer that hung out a shingle hoping to represent talent in Hollywood against all odds with zero connections in the mid-90s. In his own words, partially because of his trauma, he succeeded at achieving this goal and has represented talent in Hollywood for over 25 years, including major stars and making major deals. But what his interests are in the Got Mental Health podcast episode is Eric's story of recovery and his proactive practices that he freely shares with others that help and inspire those people towards self-healing practices themselves. Whether it's being proactive and engaging others in 12-step recovery for more than a decade and a half, a meditation practice that he happily shares with others, an active gratitude practice, which we want to talk about, and inspiring and speaking to people about his fitness transformation, Eric is on a self-proclaimed lifelong journey of growth towards greater mental and physical health and service to others, which we want to talk about today. And I'm just proud to call you my friend and my buddy.
Thanks. I'm proud to be your friend and your buddy.
Love it.
Yeah.
Welcome, Eric.
Thanks.
I want to be your friend and buddy.
Well, you can.
Do I need to come to the singing?
Yes.
Okay.
You need to come to the karaoke night.
I love it.
So I want to hear about your story. Okay. So you got into the land of Hollywood and you said that you had no connections. You didn't know what you were doing, right?
Right.
How did you get there?
Well, the little bit of background. So I grew up in Cleveland, far from Hollywood, and my parents were both concentration camp survivors and older. My parents were, I think my mother was like 16, my dad was 18 or 19 when they were in Auschwitz, and so they came, thanks. So they had immigrated to America in like 1950, 51, something like that. So I grew up very, very unrelated to anything Hollywood. And when I was living in New York, going to NYU for undergrad, and then I was in law school in New York, I was working in some production as a PA and things like that. And people were like, you'd be great in Hollywood and this and that. And I had some friends who came out here. And the truth is, I should have been a journalist. But my parents were very much against me being a journalist. So they, when you have immigrant parents, you're either a doctor or a lawyer, and I was too squeamish to be a doctor. So in law school it was pretty easy for me. So I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do, and kind of got them off my back. And then I came out to Hollywood. I wasn't sure what I was going to do or which area of the industry I was going to go to, and I sort of, because I had gone to law school, said, okay, I'm going to pursue this path, but I had zero connections. And people were like, you're never going to do this. Like, you will never break into that side of the industry. And, when somebody tells me I can't do something, that's like, I'll show you that. Don't tell me I can't do something. And so I hung out a shingle. I opened my own practice and sort of was a scrappy young lawyer, and I would do criminal defense appearances in the morning and to pay my rent with some entertainment lawyers, and in the afternoons I would, hustle, read scripts, and start developing clients. So I read a script by eventually became the movie Elf, and I still represent that writer. And,
no way.
Yeah, so
great film.
Did that deal. We did a couple of those before it became a deal with New Line, and then became the movie Elf. And like I say, I still represent David Berenbaum, and sort of went from there. Yeah.
I want to go back to, you said it should have been a journalist.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
So, as a kid, I was really I was active in the Jewish community in Cleveland, and I cared about issues and things like that. And I would write letters to the editor that would get published when I was 15. And when I lived in Israel, I wrote an article that eventually I sold to the Cleveland Jewish News. And there was a very senior journalist who had met my parents, and through them I met him. And I think he said to my mother, I had ink in my veins. So I had a real natural knack for it. And that year I wrote. He kind of mentored me, and he was a big time guy, and he would just edit my stuff, and I was selling stories to the Jerusalem Post, just human interest stories. They opened an American gym in Jerusalem in 1985. Like, I did a story on that, and I sold the story to the Jerusalem Post. And I'd never taken a journalism class in my life, and my parents were so against it, and I just didn't have the resilience to sort of say, this is what I'm going to do. And so, it's kind of interesting. I represent mostly writers. I have an affinity towards writers and artists, and so I think it sort of evolved that way. Whenever I tell this to anybody, they're like, well, you can still do it. And I'm kind of like, nah, the journalism game's different these days than it was back in the day, and whatnot. And, and I've got a busy life. So
I really want you to go, because and I don't think this is just an Eastern European thing. I think this goes across a lot of different cultures. Like the notion that it's either you're a doctor or you're an attorney, and if you don't do either one of them, you won't be successful.
Then you're a disappointment.
You're a disappointment, right? Like, my parents lost hope in me in my education courses, but they had hope in my brother in a sense of like him becoming the doctor. He went to school for psychology, did all these things. And remember clearly my grandparents creating that pressured environment of like, you need to be a doctor. You need to be the doctor. You need to be the doctor. Why do you think that is the case? Like what is it in our culture?
I think it's that the insecurity or the idea that there's some stability in those careers, that there's some, the Buddhist perspective would be that gives you some kind of ground, right? That gives you some security in your life and stability and protection.
Is it also like a respect and a hierarchy in a sense where
I suppose there's
like
something,
a noble position?
I would suspect that there's something to that as well. Some stature and respect. Yeah, I think that mindset, that old school, old world, Eastern European or immigrant, mindset is that those are these careers of sort of note to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatnot.
I don't know if you caught this show. It's is it something Flesher's in Trouble? Or something like where he's a physician.
I haven't seen it, but I'm actually I was at the wedding of the girl who did that show, Taffy Brodesser-Akner, and her husband Claude Brodesser. So I've been in touch with them for some time, but she's really become a great success. But yeah, I haven't seen the show yet.
The reason I bring it up is because he's a physician, and in the show, everybody's ridiculing him because he's holding such a low position in life as a physician. So I just find that really funny and ironic.
Yeah.
in the day and age of this.
Yeah.
So
why do you think that generation values security so much?
Good question.
Because I think that it was so it was fleeting for them. I mean, especially at least I can only speak to my experience or my parents' experience, but I think what they went through and all of that was just so traumatic, and there was such insecurity that there's that hope that I think even boiling it down to the people certain people who survived or who had money were able to sort of get out or buy their way out of Eastern Europe and escape the Nazis and things like that, so that these positions you'd make money, you'd have a certain amount of wealth, there'd be some level of security and protection in that. So I think there's probably something to that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I'm curious if you're open to talking about it. What was it like being the son of your parents who were in a concentration camp? I mean, because I think it's important for people to learn the impact that has on a family, psychologically, emotionally, the dynamics that it creates. And I'm curious what that was like for you.
How many hours do we have today?
Well, we can cancel the other one.
Yeah.
Look, without dismissing any trauma that they went through, and,
Sure.
and there was so much, it was a fairly traumatic childhood. My parents, were damaged. I mean, they were very damaged, I think, as a result of it. I think my dad probably had some, before his childhood, before his concentration camp experience, I think his childhood was probably rough even to begin with.
Where did they grow up?
My dad grew up in Romania, in the kind of Transylvania, not far from where my mother was in Czechoslovakia, or would be Slovakia. It's in the border of Ukraine now, but not far from each other. But they met in Cleveland after concentration camp. But it was
really?
Wow. Yeah. There were a lot of these survivor communities in various different American cities where there were Jewish communities. They ended up in these places, and those communities tended to be close, and those people sort of stick together. And they came out of that experience, I think, very damaged and had zero skill set of coping or healthy parenting or anything. And my dad was a fairly rageful, controlling person. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Shine, where Jeffrey Rush played David Helfgott. My dad was a lot like that dad.
Wow.
And I think the result of that experience for that character, for David, for that person, was to have sort of a split. Fortunately that didn't happen for me, but there was a lot of trauma growing up in that environment, and which I've spent most of my life recovering from to some extent. But the things that were sort of rewarded in that household, were excelling in school and and having to. My dad could get physically abusive, and there was a lot of emotional. Inappropriateness in terms of, I remember when I was probably 5, my dad would lay down with us and tell us stories of concentration camp. It's like, that's a lot for a kid it's just intense stuff. And, and there'd be people who would say, but what they went through, and like, I don't blame anybody at this point anymore. I mean, everyone has to be responsible for their own sort of behavior, but that I don't really live that story. I have I'm 56. I'm now responsible for myself and my kids, and being different and sort of breaking that chain and all of that. But we don't make excuses for people either, even though they've gone through their own trauma. So it was, to just answer the question, it was a challenging, crazy environment, which, I think
can only imagine.
Yeah.
I find it really interesting, like, especially people that come from such extreme traumatic places. Like, so my great grandfather he lost his entire family during the war, and brought his entire family, whoever was left, here. They left everything behind, and taking away, not trying to take away, but trying to split off from the home life and the personal life, right? From a professional standpoint, what that trauma kind of fortified that individual to become successful and push. And did you grow up in a successful household from a monetary standpoint? I'm just really curious from that side of things.
Yeah, I think relatively yes. I think I would say my dad was the best business person or businessman. Because he was a difficult guy, I think that inhibited him in some ways. But the way they could show their love, I think, on some level, was by being a good provider,
right?
And they did. Materialistically, things were provided. I mean, there were emotional strings attached,
sure, of course,
and all kinds of manipulation around things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he did well. I think you'd just say upper middle class, or something like that, and did well. I mean, he had a furniture store for a long time called Eric Furniture Interiors, because it was named after me, of course, because there was an obsession around that, and so he was fairly successful at that enterprise, and he was very involved in the Jewish community, and it was like one of those situations where you had your public persona and then your private at home craziness was going on.
I'm just because I feel like that the trauma creates like a fortified need to like provide and become like this rock. In your mind, you think you're becoming that rock, right? Aside from the emotional disconnect, but like from a financial provider side, some people that go through that I've noticed, and because that happened in my family, there was no emotional connection,
right?
But from a stability, foundational rock standpoint,
right.
It was fully there in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Because they felt like they needed to.
Yeah, and listen, I don't dismiss the idea that who I am today, healthy and unhealthy, that there were positive attributes and traits and things like that came from my parents that, were part of the mixed bag of mishigas that came across, right? So
for those who don't know that, it's craziness and
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that people's self-defense mechanisms are what often hurt people unconsciously. And in the 12-step program, you know this, the 7th step is making a list of character defects. Is that 8?
No.
That's 6.
Yeah.
No, 7. No. I'm right.
Someone get the big book out here.
Fifth is
read the inventory. No,
inventory is 4.
Reading it's 5.
Reading it is 5. Right, 6 is right. That's right.
Right. So
I think we need to go to a meeting, guys.
Yeah, really.
But after being in recovery for a long time, that word defect really.
So I don't love that word.
I like defenses.
I say, character traits.
Character traits. But the reason I bring that up is because, like you said, someone's trauma might propel someone to really want to help them provide for their family, right? And some of the traits might help in one way, and they also hurt and harm in another way. And so I think to grow and to move forward, we have to acknowledge both sides. We have to acknowledge, okay, I was using this behavior to help provide for my family, and I needed that in this way. Is there another strategy to create the same outcome where I don't have to go to work 15 hours a day and not be disconnected from my kid? Right.
It's funny because I've toyed with, Workaholics Anonymous because
me too.
And that's
there's
actually there is such a thing actually.
There's everything.
Yeah, there is everything.
What's their phone number?
But
help.
Yeah, that's one of those things where you can sort of take work to an extreme, whether it's to create chaos in your own life, which is reminiscent of the chaos you grew up with, and you can then excuse it as by saying, but I have to be a provider for my family. So you can have this unhealthy behavior, take it to an extreme and have a great rationalization. It's one of those that are like that. But I think for me, I've always been striving to get healthier, and I had some innate instinct to do that somehow from when I was a kid, actually. And then to find balance, whether it's in work and various different aspects of my life, is to find balance. I mean, I say this up front in the beginning, this first quadrant of this of us talking. I'm not a mental health expert, although I probably could have an honorary degree for all the work that I've done. And even when I'm talking to other people, I only share my sort of experience, what did I do and how did it help me, and maybe it'll help you and whatever, and I'm willing to, and it's sort of from a layperson's perspective. So even just saying that here, that qualification to say, by no means am I any sort of expert or anything, but I can say experientially that I've changed so much in my life from being someone who was completely just doing anything I could to sort of not to dissociate from feeling and being present, to being able to be in that place, from being somebody who is a catastrophic thinker and who is sort of, bred on the sort of, it's like that was what I was fed as a kid, and going from somebody who is sort of self-sabotaging and on some level self-destructive to not living a life that way. So it comes from what I share. It comes from just my own experience and the change that I've seen, and then how I've seen that, help, whether it's somebody I've talked to or what other people do in that same vein. So
based off reading, and I just want to say thank you so much for being so honest and vulnerable about what you went through in childhood. A lot of people feel really scared to talk about their relationships with their parents if there was trauma, because they don't want to feel like they're betraying their family. They don't want to feel
disloyal.
Or being disloyal.
Right.
And I want to tell people that you're not. You're just learning how to own how you were impacted. We're all impacted, and it's not about making it wrong or right. It's just looking at your truth on how you were impacted.
Yeah, I think that concept is really a shame. For me, it feels like a shame-based concept, right? And sort of secrets kind of concept of around family secrets and things like that, and family shame and whatnot. I don't think there's anything you could do that would honor your parents more, in a sense, than becoming a healthier person, really. Whether they like it or they don't, whether they can accept it or they don't, or whether they buy into it or they don't, right? It doesn't really matter, because really any parent would, having kids, want their kids to be, at least if the healthy version of that parent would want their kids to be better than they were, stronger, richer, everything better,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that to that extent, like I said, I think it honors somebody's parents to be truthful and honest, and because I don't bring it with a lot of judgment. I think my parents did the best they could do. I think they were just, fucked up people who went through a horrible experience, and my dad, I think in his later years would apologize, and he would do it a lot, and I would just say, it's kind of like water under the bridge, like it's like, okay, and
well, that's what unconditional love is. Like, regardless of what happens, I'm still gonna love you.
Yeah, and I think because of my own recovery and specifically in 12-step, I was able to show up for him, in the last week of his life in a way that, I feel good about, and actually be there for this person who I had a lot of ambivalence for. So,
I love what you mentioned earlier, though, because I think there's a flip side to this, right? Where you said, I'm appreciative of a lot of the things that they did do for me, because it made me kind of who I am in a lot of the positive ways, right? So I think that there needs to be a balance in when talking about your upbringing as a child. Like, same for me. Like, my parents did a lot of amazing things in my life that have made me who I am today. And there have been things that they could have done better. And there's going to be things that I could have done better with my daughter and my child, right? And I feel like it's acknowledging both, but I don't think you just have to revere and constantly focus on the positive. It's okay to focus on sometimes the negative too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Alice Miller talks about it in the drama The Gifted Child, right? Like, she talks about this idea, like, can you honestly see your parents in a light where you're not idealizing them and things like that, and you feel like you're betraying them, and like those are sort of there's a book by a woman named Dorothea MacArthur, I think, called it's a really terrible title, and it's an older book, but it's called Birth of a Self in Adulthood, and it's about kids who grow up in these very enmeshed families, and there's like a command structure which tell you, you can't speak about what happened in the house. You have to maintain these secrets. You're, all of this stuff. And you really feel like a core part of you is like locked into that. And it really impacts like your life. I mean, I find as I'm kind of getting into a new relationship right now, like I find that the things that the way I communicate could be even governed by a fear of like rejection, abandonment, all these kinds of things that are still at play despite all the work I've done. And those only come out in potentially a conversation with a significant other or my kids. Like that's where those things tend to show up more so. I mean, they show up in work relationships too, but that's where I think all the work that I've done, and that's one of the most consistent things I've done in my life is therapy. It changes slowly over time if you keep doing the work.
Why do you think that we have this innate kind of relationship where a lot of these things start coming out with the people that we love the most instead of just people that we work with and our outside communities? Why do you think that's so?
Well, I think that sort of that primal brain, that wherever that is in your brainstem, that whatever portion of your brain that is, it doesn't differentiate between, that past experience, that early like childhood experience and that current experience. It's almost like I'm talking to her to dear one, significant other, and it just lines up as like this is like, you know, the object or whatever it is. And if there's, so it doesn't really differentiate it in that old brain kind of a way, or that little kid that sort of lives inside all of us, right? That is, and so you're having that experience. It's almost like a timeless experience. And then it's about developing new tools and skills to say, wait, oh, that's not her, or that's not him, and that's not my mom or dad or whatever, and I don't have to react to it that way, even though that's wiring. I mean, that is what Body Keeps the Score kind of an idea is like, you know, we get wired a certain way. I because I'm on this health kick, I did this, I met with this, I did a test with this holistic cardiologist, and they do this thing where they put these things on your fingers and they can measure, and it was like high mental stress. And I like meditate all the time, and I was like, first of all, how do I know this isn't bullshit? Like, you know what I mean? Like how does this machine tell? And it was something about like your different nervous systems. And I was like, you know, it's possible that my body is still wired to like fight or flight, and that it's picking that up somewhere. And maybe that, you know, maybe it's biofeedback or EMDR or things that I could potentially try to see if I can change that. Right. So, you know, it's
well, it is.
Yeah. So this is old wired stuff, and you know, I do believe you can create different new neural pathways, and whatever. It's a lot of work, you know.
I feel like our most intimate connections unconsciously bring out our most intimate wounds, and we are drawn to what's familiar unconsciously and subconsciously.
Yeah.
So we're either forming bonds with people that are based on familial trauma bonds, or as we get healthier, we start forming relationships with people that are in alignment with our new values, with our new way of seeing the world. So it's a lot of work, and I really commend you for doing this work, especially as a man. And as a man talking about all of the things that you're talking about, it gives other men permission to go to therapy, to go and talk to a coach, to cry, to be a very successful man in business, as a lawyer, whatever your profession is, and say, yeah, I also need to go take care of my mental wellness and see how I was affected by my childhood. And that doesn't make you any less of a man.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's also important to define the fact that like those neural connections and those relations to the closest people that we love might never go away. But the fact that you're aware of it, and it's because there's a lot of people out there that are like, okay, well, how much work do I need to put in for this to be done with? And I can move on with my life. It's like, it doesn't work like that. It can exist throughout your entire life. It's just being aware of it and kind of processing it as it starts flaring up, and being okay with constantly working on yourself.
Yeah.
Well, I think what happens is the more work you do, you discharge the stress response. So you actually start to respond from more of a neutral place and respond to this outside stimulus from a fight, flight, or freeze response. So if someone's acting out inappropriately, instead of going, well, fuck you, I'm out, or physically hurting them or emotionally being manipulative and whatever, you're just like, that doesn't feel good for me in this moment. I'm actually going to walk away. I'm going to set a boundary.
Right. Yeah. Well, you were relearning how, you know, better way to be. And the motivating factor for me at a certain point, and I mean in my teenage years, was that I didn't want to do eventually to my kids, and I literally had that conscious thought.
Yeah.
I did, and I had. So when I was 14, I was getting into some trouble as a kid, and I was sort of acting out a little bit, and I would do. We'll get to this. I mean, but I would do things to get out of my head. Like I was so uncomfortable in what I was experiencing. Whether it was shoplifting with friends or playing with fire, whatever sort of gave you that rush. You know what I mean?
Stealing vodka bottles from Rite Aid.
Whatever.
Yes.
You too?
Yeah. I mean, whatever gave you that sort of that head rush, right? And I got into trouble, and then wasn't like serious trouble, but enough that I got scared. And I got on my bike, and I rode my bike to my pediatrician's office. I didn't know who to talk to. And my dad was so involved with my school that was not a safe place. And the rabbis at the school were physically abusive to kids, some of them, not all of them, but some of them. And so I went to my pediatrician, and I was like, I don't know what gave me that intuition that,
Right.
well, this was somebody who knew me from since I was a tiny
Safe
kid
haven.
and took care of me, and we're not under my dad's thumb as a community leader. And I told him what was going on. They called my parents in and they got me into, they're like, he needs to go talk to somebody. And I went to see somebody for about 4 to 6 weeks, and I knew the guy was kind of a quack. I don't mean that like so awfully, but he just was like, how was your day at school? Like, it was not really getting into the kind of, and again, I had this instinct, and I ended up with somebody who I would say I give credit to, like, saving my life. And he was actually the son. There's a therapist named Moshe Spiro who lives in Israel now, and I still am in contact with. And he was the son of the rabbi at the synagogue where I did my bar mitzvah. And I think my dad felt like, oh, he was going to be somebody he could, control, but he couldn't. And he was a brilliant, brilliant psychologist. And I would go during my free period twice a week. And I literally think that really did save my life on some level. And then as that sort of developed, I kind of was motivated by this idea, or this concept that if you don't do the work, if you're abused, I think you either, abuse yourself or you become an abuser. And I definitely was in the category of more, like a little bit of self-harm, emotional self-harm. And I consider even self-harm like biting nails. Like, I think, it's like when I finally quit biting nails, when I was married already. I mean, it was probably 15 years ago. But I'm like, you're literally tearing your flesh off of your fingers, right? It's like, it's kind of like, and it's to cover up feelings, in my opinion. This is all my lay person's opinion. But I felt that if you didn't do the work, you were bound to repeat it again. Yeah. And so that was the big motivator, is I didn't want to do that to my kids.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for
seriously,
that.
I love that perspective.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pivot a little.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because now we have a little bit of an idea of why stress was created in your body. And then later on in life, you started getting into drugs and alcohol, correct?
Yeah.
How long were you doing drugs and alcohol for before you got sober?
I grew up in this very sheltered environment, so I didn't even know Orthodox Jewish people, they'll drink at synagogue and on Shabbat and things like that. But, I didn't know what pot was till I was 18 or 19. And when I tried smoking pot when I lived in Israel, it was like anxiety relief. It was like, oh my God, I actually feel like I can not be in this kind of anxious state that I think I was in constantly. And so.
Were you doing drugs while you were going to law school?
Oh yeah. But that was 18 or 19. I was 19. So when I went to New York, I went to NYU and.
Oh yeah.
And then I went into I lived in a fraternity, and I was a social chairman, and that's when everything sort of took off. And I definitely became like a regular, like a pothead, because it was really, I think, an anxiety management tool. And then, being in New York and living in New York City, look, for me, again, starting with the shoplifting and all of that, it was all about as a teenager, what takes you out of your experience, right? And so the drugs and alcohol were just another form of getting out of the experience, the emotional experience of being uncomfortable, of being anxious, of being fearful, of being, having catastrophic thinking. I mean, all this thing was a disaster, and that thing's, and so, but that's, when you go down that rabbit hole, it could go in every different direction, whether it's sex or drugs or whatever. There's all kinds of behavior that'll take you out of it. And
really,
I would, whatever would work in the moment was great until it doesn't work anymore. And then, and I got through my years in New York in college and law school. I mean, I did get through law school smoking pot all the time.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I, and then I got to LA, and I was living with a bunch of guys who were big partiers as well. And then eventually, some of the guys stopped. Some of my roommates, are sober 25 years, those guys that I lived with in LA, and that just, it stopped working for them earlier. And for me, it took a little bit more to get to that place of where I wanted to be present, and I could do that between working in therapy, which I consistently did. There were some periods I stopped, but through college and then various different iterations of therapy, and then able to get some time being sober and learning tools and all of that. So I don't know if I've diverted too much from your question,
perfect.
but
right. I actually because we have you here, and because I want this to be also a learning opportunity for people that are listening.
Arthur's solution based.
I'm solution based.
Yeah, me too.
No. Well, it goes back to your time at NYU, going through law school, taking the bar. Can you talk about the mental state of that entire experience? Because my wife's an attorney, and I kind of saw her through that entire phase before she started law school to when she passed the bar finally.
Right.
And how much.
Congratulations for making it through all of that. With
Anna, I hope you hear this. No, just joking. It's easy when you got the wife that I have. But
that is really sweet. Everyone needs to talk about their wife. Arthur talks about his wife. You understand?
Well, the reason I mentioned is I really want, if you can go into, like, obviously you smoked pot and that not boding well for the point that I'm trying to come across with. But how did you deal with your mental health through law school and taking the bar?
So I think back to sort of which I think is good. We covered some of the early stories.
Sure.
So the one of the things that I had to do well at to survive my home life was be okay, do well in school. Otherwise I'd get in trouble.
Okay.
And my mom, she wasn't proactive. She was more neglectful in a sense than she was, like my dad was overt. My mother was, and she was very sweet and all of this, but she would say, look, just tell him what he wants to hear and then do what you want, which really created a dynamic for both, like,
it's okay to lie.
It's okay to lie. It's okay to lie because it's safer. And also this sort of double life, like perform here and then go do what you want. Right. So
did you ever wonder if their relationship was like that?
I don't think I had the sort of wherewithal to think about it that way. I mean, look, again, I think that survivors, when they reconstituted families after having such loss, it was just, I mean, some were worse than others. Some people were crazier than others, and some were not. I mean, it just depended, I think, on both their age through the experience and their previous home life and whatever. But that was the split in, like, so I was on student council at NYU. I was a social chairman of a fraternity, so I was an achiever, and then I was running parties at clubs, and I was out all night and getting crazy, and that was like there was this other side.
Right.
So I didn't. Again, I just knew how to show up. It was probably more of a survival mechanism that I was able to sort of show up and perform a certain way in school. And again, but there was nothing healthy going on. There were no healthy coping mechanisms. It was really, and I think that as a human being, I sometimes when I speak at meetings or I talk to people, I kind of describe it as like I was just a reactor, you know what I'm saying? So, and I'm sure it was probably hard to be around me for certain friends, or I was just with friends who are other partiers and whatnot. So it's been an evolution and still an evolution at this point, even in life, of growth to be a different person, a better person, more evolved person. But I don't think there was anything conscious about any of what I was doing.
I truly appreciate you saying this, because from a side point of view, you would see the kids in school that are the high achievers. They look like they got their shit together. Like, I want to be like that person. Hear you honestly come out here and say, like, yeah, like that was my way of escaping. But for me to say that it was easy and it was like a clean path is not the case, right? Because from an outside perspective, you see this person who's immaculate. It's beautiful. It's easy for them. Why does it come so easy for them?
Yeah,
right?
and a lot of times those kids are really suffering or suicidal or whatever. Yeah, it's true.
There's a lot of value to that information, 100%.
I just respect you so much. I just want you to know that. I really respect you so much. And I think how we met, right? I mean, everything you're talking about, I feel like we talked about these very similar things, but particularly, you're switching. Sorry, I know I'm a little over the place in this moment, but just track me because I have a point here. Drinking, drugs, escaping into work are all tools to deal with stress and anxiety and fear and stress responses.
Right, I agree with that.
So now we're moving into, you live a life where you have a really big career, you have a lot of stress, you have a family, you have a relationship, you have your own trauma that you're working through and all of it. I know that meditation is very important to you because we were at a Hollywood party together and we hadn't met yet, right? And we're on this rooftop in Beverly Hills and everyone's drinking around us, everyone's doing their music and you know, we're just standing, all of a sudden we get introduced, right? And within 5 minutes, we're talking about how you're in recovery and I'm in recovery and how much you love meditation. And you sent me, who was it you sent me again?
Some Pema Chodron.
Yeah. And that's how we connected.
Yeah.
So clearly in your life, you've replaced alcohol, drugs, other destructive behaviors with now certain tools that help you. And meditation being one of them.
Let's say I'm replacing. Still. It's
I'm right
there
with you, man. I'm right there with you.
But you're not using it to escape.
What's that?
The meditation.
No. In fact, I think at least the sort of school of thought that I follow, and I've done 3 in-person weekend meditation retreats with Pema Chodron, so I'm a big fan of hers. But like her, at least the way I perceive it, whole kind of thing is about staying. Like it's like when you feel a feeling, an uncomfortable feeling or whatever, is just stay. Just stay with that feeling and whatever. And in fact, it was helpful. Listening to one of her, they would record these week-long seminars she would do. It could be 20 hours or whatever, but one of them is what led me to quitting biting my nails, which is something I had done since I was in first grade. And it was kind of like, I didn't like what I was doing, or when I was smoking cigarettes, and it was like, and I was just like, wow, I'm tearing my flesh off of my body with my teeth, and then it hurts, and like, what am I doing? And I knew from stuff that I had listened to from her was that it was covering something up. There was a feeling that was coming up that I didn't want to feel, that if I did this thing, then it would just get me out of my head or that feeling or something for the moment. And that if I were going to stop doing it, refrain, from doing it, then I have to be prepared mentally and emotionally for something to come up that I was trying to mask with this behavior. This isn't some terribly self-destructive thing, and all kinds of people do it. But the concept is the same concept. If I stop doing something that's going to take me out of my being in the present moment, I need to be prepared for whatever is going to come up. Is it fear? Is it anxiety? Is it whatever that might be? And then just stay with it and just sit with it. So for me, because of sort of the 12-step work that I was doing and whatnot, it kind of took me into like, okay, I'm going to start, what is meditation about? And then I kind of got into it, maybe, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, whenever it was. And then I started feeling results. Like, it was actually a friend of mine. She's a coach. Denise Spatafor is her name. She was like, hey, I'm going to sit with you. And this is kind of how I approach it with people who say to me, hey, I'm not a meditation teacher, but Denise took me we went to Franklin Canyon Park and we sat by the lake, and she just like, well, this is what I do. And then I made a commitment. I'm going to do this for a month and I'm going to see how I feel afterwards. And I didn't really care whether I liked it or I didn't like it, whether it was uncomfortable or uncomfortable. I made the commitment and I stuck to the commitment. And then a month later, I was like, whoa, like that's really cool. And then it took me down this rabbit hole of like meditation. And again, it's not to escape feelings at all. It's actually just to say, okay, and I could have a conversation with my girlfriend or whatever, or something like that that doesn't, like it, I don't feel like something that's resolved, and then I feel like something comes up for me in the moment, and I'm not sure. So as opposed to sort of playing it out in the relationship, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go just sit and just see what comes up for me and experience it. So it's not like there's no escape aspect of it at all. It's really about just saying, okay, I've just got to be open and prepared to whatever comes up and whatever feeling there is. And when I share what I do with somebody else, and I have, and it may they may do what I end up doing, or they may experience something else. But I mostly try and say, just try it for a minimum of 2 to 4 weeks, so you can actually see what happens. And usually there's positive results, and then they start on their own journey and their own path.
Would you say that, as a piece of advice, and from what I'm gathering, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that someone who has the fear of meditating or the fear of sitting there and their mind just won't quiet down, that all it takes is just consistency and commitment to that consistency? Is that like the biggest take from this?
I think, yeah, and I think that's part A. Part B is sort of accepting the noise as it is, because nobody's mind is quiet, and that monkey mind, it's like it goes and it goes and it goes, and sometimes they call it monkey brain or whatever. It's just like chattering, and so everybody's brain is noisy. So when somebody says I can't do it for even 2 minutes, I'm kind of like, just let it be noisy then, and just stay with whatever's going on, So
you found that by staying within that consistency over time, your brain kind of figured out how to.
It gets quieter. Yeah, it gets quieter.
That's a great piece of advice.
And some days it's noisier, and some days it's quieter. But that's why it's called a practice, in my opinion, right? 100%. Because it's a practice. It's not. There's no, and that's why we've talked about this a little bit, but like. There's no end to the work, in my opinion. Like you said that earlier, like when people are like, well, when is it going to be over? I used to feel that like, God, like how long am I going to have to do therapy? How long is this? Right. And like sometimes, especially, there are times when you're more activated and you need more support, as you peel layers of the onion back, and where you confront another thing in life. Maybe it's an illness, maybe it's a loss, maybe it's whatever, you need more support. But I feel, and I share it with my kids, like I'll hopefully continue to grow until I die, and and it's great. Like,
I love that. Hopefully, I continue to grow until I die. That's
and then we grow after death.
Right. And then we're
depending on what
spiritually.
My meditation is such a huge tool that I use, and I'm curious, what has been some of the positive effects of you having a consistent meditation routine?
Well, I feel like I don't need to use other things to sort of check out, because now I can just be with whatever comes up. Mm-hmm. So that's been, I'd say, the main thing. So if I feel triggered, and again, or I tighten, so like my therapist is this guy, Daniel Stewart, who's incredible. And he's a yoga teacher, and he's got this East-West kind of practice and incorporates all of this kind of stuff. But like when he talks about is like, he was talking about his own experience leaving the Elton John concert, and like there was crazy traffic, and you feel this tightening. It's like who doesn't feel like that all the time,
or pulling into that concert.
Yeah,
I felt that tightening going into it.
Yeah, that's right. So you're like, or something just doesn't go the way you expect it to go, or that you don't get the response from that person you're talking to, or that client, or whatever the thing is we kind of constrict or we tighten. So then it's just like, well, what do you do with it? How long? Do you take a breath and then you feel like, okay, it's like, it's all okay, it's not a big deal? Or do you lash out at somebody, or what do you do with that experience, right? So I think the biggest benefit for me is learning tools to be okay, just to feel okay, or to kind of work, just, I don't know if that, so that's sort of probably.
Well, also in the practice of breathing properly during those times, right? Because when you're in that moment, you're technically not breathing.
Yeah, you
properly.
forget to breathe. I think smoking cigarettes for me actually was partially about breathing. I honestly, like, it was like when you smoke, you take these deep breaths. It's like,
wow, yeah.
So there's the nicotine aspect.
What'd you smoke?
I was Marlboro Reds guy until
I was a Parliament Lights guy.
Yeah, well,
I was too, but not a guy.
When I as I got healthier, I went to
Parliament Lights.
Parliament.
That's my uncle started smoking spirits because it's in his mind healthier. He's like, it's healthier.
I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine you smoking.
Oh, pack a day.
That's so weird.
I never considered myself a smoker until I started buying cigarettes and not bumming them. And then once I started buying, I was like, I'm screwed.
Well, when I used to try and quit, I used to get like, there'd be a liquor store that would sell singles, Lucy's, you called them, so you buy a Lucy for 50 cents or 25 cents.
I never bought those because I never knew who was touching them, so I was kind of avoiding that.
Right.
Okay, so you're a superhero. Establish that.
Nice.
In your day-to-day life right now as an entertainment lawyer, you're dealing with a lot of stress. You're one of the things you use to help you deal with the stress is meditation. What are some other things that you do?
So I try to do something. If I could start my day in the morning where I could do a therapy session followed by like a 12-step meeting, followed by like a meditation practice.
I do
like
that.
Doing something like I could spend the first half of the day just doing self-care now if I had the time. Yeah, like, okay, like this is what I need to get into my day. And unfortunately, I don't have that luxury. So I try and meditate every day.
Well, who has that luxury? I mean, if you're performing at such a high level,
we make our own time.
That's fucking right. But that's something
true.
I struggle with, is creating that time. I usually like 3 hours in the morning for self-care.
Right. So I try and do something every day.
Yeah.
Like, whether it's some kind of meditation, if I have, if I go to yoga on a Sunday, there's like a bit of a meditative thing.
I'll be there soon.
Let's see that. Before, that's part of it. I try and exercise, do something exercising at least 6 times a week. And that's kind of been the last. So I started this new journey of like physical transformation. I can show you the pics, but a year and a half, a little more than a year and a half ago. And since July of 21, and I've been very consistent throughout that.
Nice.
And,
congratulations.
And that was really that was like actually just kind of getting into another level of like self-care and health and all of that. But sometimes I'll stop in the middle of the day and I'll go and sit for 10 minutes and I'll just breathe and
Man, I love that.
How do you deal with Hollywood though?
It's
because
yeah, it's hard.
It's so hard because I remember I went to one of the biggest premieres you can ever go to ever in this world, meeting every major celebrity on the planet when I was a kid. And I remember being so overwhelmed. I was walking down the red carpet and I was like, I just want to get out of here. I just want to get out of here. I just want to go to the bathroom. Please just take me to the bathroom. And like all these, it was like a mile long red carpet of paparazzi. It was so overwhelming. And I often feel like a lot of people in Hollywood, I say this with a lot of love, are fake and they're like putting out this image, and it's like a lot of deals that have to go on. I guess that's like any business, right? But how do you maintain your sense of equilibrium, your sense of groundedness in that really crazy world?
So I think partially, in the way we were talking about it earlier, I think partially I there's something that comes from my family of origin that actually is helpful in this regard, which is, my parents and what they went through and all of that. I'm a little bit generationally displaced. I have a sister who's almost 20 years older than I am, and my parents would have been in their mid-90s now, and so I'm still that sort of old school first generation American, and I kind of come to it with, I think, a bit of a different approach. I'm not really in the boys' club of Hollywood. I'm thankfully, I think, well respected. I think I do a good job for my clients.
You do a fantastic job. I've seen you with your clients. You're phenomenal at what you do.
I appreciate it, but like when I think you come from this background of like this kind of Holocaust trauma, it's like,
can't get any worse.
I don't, and trust me, my parents would tell me that all the time whenever I'd complain as a kid. They were like, it's not as bad as being in Auschwitz.
I can only imagine that.
Yeah.
That's a really good mentality to have. So you maintain a really healthy perspective.
Yeah, I don't, it's not my entire life. I don't try to be at every premiere. And sometimes I think I tend to be honest and direct with people I work with. I'm not, and I'm very, very blessed. I've been really lucky and blessed to have great clients and who've mostly been loyal and who've stayed with me and I've grown with and I think they've grown with me. But I just have to be true to kind of myself and being direct and honest and forthright as best as I can, and I'm not gonna but I am who I am, kind of like so, and I kind of wear my emotions on my sleeve to a certain extent, and so I try to be a real person, and I try and attract and work with those kinds of same people, and there's somebody for everybody, I suppose, and maybe if I were different, I'd be more successful. If I don't know, but I'm. And it's a tough town to be in because there's a lot of compare and despair. You look at sort of other people who are doing what you do and they're doing better and why, and then coming to it with a perspective of am I good enough? Am I accomplished enough? And all of those things. And I never feel like I am really. I mean, on some level.
I think that happens in any industry.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Right.
I think, I mean, even in my industry, it's like, well, what is this program doing? Why are they making more money? Why are they more successful?
Yeah.
You know, I feel like that happens just across the board.
That's a good perspective.
But again, I think you're right about like the idea that there's a lot of narcissism and there's a lot of like all that kind of stuff. You know, I try and approach it. Look, first of all, I have my own business and I can sort of choose in a way who I work with and who I don't work with. And so I'm not and that's partially hanging out a shingle and starting my own thing. I'll tell you something. I think because of the relationship with my father, I couldn't work for another man. Like I had to have my own business because I was so incapable in a sense of having like a father authority figure boss man telling me what to do. It was too much for me. Like I couldn't do it. So it sort of pushed me towards doing my own thing on some level. So it's like, it's, you know.
For someone who's looking to start in this career, what kind of advice would you give them? Someone starting off fresh from everything that you've learned.
To do what I do?
To work in the entertainment space as an attorney or just to become an attorney in general.
Oh, I mean, you know, there's a lot of attorneys. I don't think my son, who is in middle school, and when he was in middle school, he's in college now, but he wanted to be a lawyer. I was like, don't do it. Don't.
Why are most attorneys, they say that to people when they're like, because that's the response I get across the board. I've yet to meet an attorney that says you should absolutely do this. This is.
I think there are. It's funny you were asking about law school and you were talking about your wife. I never knew a bigger group of partiers, quote unquote partiers, or people who were like doing drugs and alcohol. Like the law students, definitely, I think per capita were more engaged in that than even in college, right?
Is it the pressure?
Yeah, maybe it's the pressure or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if there's a pressure from parents even to become a lawyer, and that plays a part in it. I think that. Like the guys who are all gung-ho in law school and law review and all of this, I think most of them don't practice law. I was the least likely guy in law school to actually be a lawyer, and I'm a lawyer. So you never know how it sort of plays out. I don't know, maybe there's not a lot of satisfaction. Maybe I like what I do. I like the people I work with. But I do think there's a part that's still squelched a little bit that's more creative. So I'm trying to get involved with some projects creatively or producerially. But, you know, how somebody breaks in, it is such an odd business in a way. You know, most careers, it's like if I go to like college and then I go to, you know, grad school and I get my, you know, family therapy like degree and whatever, then I go do my hours and I can become a therapist, you know, and all. There's a ABCD kind of a thing. I think in Hollywood, you can do everything right and not succeed, and you can do everything wrong and become like it's kind of weird business that way. So
I think what I'm also hearing though is that, and I think this goes across regardless of your profession, you got to love what you do. Like you wanted to be a journalist and somehow you didn't become a journalist, but you created that connection to writing and entertainment and kind of that world in a sense. And also you kind of flow with the times. You see what's kind of missing and you want to get more into the creative side rather than the legal side. So it's being flexible.
Yeah.
And it's doing what you love to do, right? And finding that passion. And being honest and transparent with your clients and the people that you work with. I mean, that's what I'm hearing is just be yourself, really. Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
No, continue. Answer that
No,
question.
I was just gonna say, like, you know, I think again, because of where I come from, life is short, you know, and I've had friends who passed away when they, you know, had got cancer at 45. And I don't think, I like what you're saying about, you know, yes, do what you love for sure. But the idea that you don't having my own business has given me a certain amount of freedom, and having the kinds of clients that I have, generally speaking. So, you know, are people who trust me and they feel like if I'm in Istanbul with my family, but I'm also still doing work, they know that I'm reachable. But I want to work with people who understand that to me, being with my family and doing a trip or something like that is really important. And that's something that actually is a value add to them based on who I am and how I approach things rather than it's a negative or detracts from it. Sure. And so There are people who will say to me, lawyers, entertainment lawyers, how can you leave town for 3 weeks? Like, I could never do it. My clients would never. I think COVID has changed that to a certain degree because people work remotely and there's a certain level of acceptance now that's greater. But life is short. So whether you think we get to go around again or how you come back or whatever it is, do you want to do it doing something you hate or being chained to your desk or not having experiences that when that old cliche like when you're on your deathbed, are you going to regret having gone to that Little League game with your kid or taking that client meeting or right?
Or you're taking your bank account with you in the grave.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you literally just answered my question because I was going to ask you about boundaries with your phone. And when you're home with your kids, are you home with your kids? So when you're at work, are you at work? Or do you have a way of merging both?
So I've been terrible at this. And that's, hence gone trying out some Workaholics Anonymous because feedback from my sisters to my ex-wife, who I'm very, very great relationship with and is a close friend, to my kids, like feedback was, dude, you're on your phone too much, or you're not here and whatever. And that's been a part of the process of saying, I can be here, I can turn the phone off. I'm not being called into surgery. I'm not. And am I creating familiar chaos that I grew up with as a kid by having chaos because I'm, too frenetic? And that was another description. God, you're so frenetic. You're like a hurricane. You're like, so, all of that kind of a vibe was like, okay, I got to deal with this, man.
Did you initially take that as a compliment?
Oh, no, it was horrible.
Okay. I just got so excited hearing that because I'm like, oh my God, we just solved my problem. So now I'm going to go to a Workaholics Anonymous meeting because that's me too. I totally relate to that. And I get excited about those things because I get excited about change. And I think acknowledging a problem and acknowledging that there's a solution for it, like a 12-step meeting around workaholism, right? Around caffeine. I'm 100% addicted to coffee. Can't get off of it no matter what I do. And I'm not going to shame myself for it. It's serving me a purpose. It gives me comfort. And at the right time, I'll get off of it and figure out what coffee's trying to do to help me escape, right?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, I'm right there with you.
From someone who quit drinking coffee for a month.
And then you had
horrible
three,
experience.
and then you had three cups yesterday, right?
I'd rather live off of 5 cups a day than no cups.
But it's okay,
Yeah.
But I took enough, and there were enough people in my life who were giving me feedback that I was escaping on my work or my phone and not being present enough. And I still sometimes get feedback when I know that I'm not as much that way or I'm not that way at all. And then I feel like resentment. I'm like, hey, I'm working on it, or I'm not that way anymore. But you know what? You develop a reputation for being a certain way. And sometimes it's hard to shake the label.
That traumatic connection, it's very hard to break.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So it's okay. I can live with that. I don't have to take that on necessarily,
Well, Eric, I love you, man. I really appreciate you. And I didn't know that you represented the person that wrote Elf. So thank you for the person that
thank you for Elf.
Thank you for Elf.
Not for being here, but thank you for Elf.
Great guy.
With all the lessons and the wisdom that you've gained in your life, knowing what you know now, what would you tell little 7-year-old Eric?
Oh, God. Now I'm going to start crying.
Let it out.
It's going to be okay. It's okay. And I got you, I'm here. And I do that kind of like, I do those conversations now as unnatural as they feel sometimes. Because that kid shows up sometimes with like very childlike excitement about something and then doesn't get that response or that, from the external thing and then feels like, and then I got to be like, hey, I got you, guy. It's okay. Like, that's been a process too. So, to be able to have that dialogue and as much as that's important, I've labeled that voice. There's a voice in there that I call the beast, and the beast voice comes up as like, whether it's you're not good enough or, whatever that sort of thinking is. And Daniel refers to it as the persecutor protector, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was there serving a purpose to help protect you or to try and explain or make sense of this just crazy environment as a kid. But it does that in a way that sort of is negative or brings, bad or negative feelings to yourself. So I have to address that too and be like, hey, like, thank you. I know you're just there to try to protect me, but you know, I got that too. So it's
That's
just
beautiful.
It's just a process, right? That you know.
We just keep swimming, swimming.
Yeah.
Eric, I'm super glad to have met you. Thank you for
Same.
having to come on our show. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you
it's
are.
happening.
That's happening. Good job.
Well, Eric, thank you again for joining us on the Got Mental Health podcast. Everybody, thank you for listening and joining in. We appreciate the comments, the feedback, the suggestions, the applause. Join us next week and rate, review, comment. Again, thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.